Good morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome to Season 2. This season is going to be very, very interesting. I hope, first of all, you can all hear me. I'm reading your comments, so that should be fine. I've got a very exciting Season 2 ahead. And what we're going to do in Season 2 is we're going to cover a lot of interesting topics. The first one being today. It's going to be about equipment and settings for DSLR astrophotography. We're going to go also later into imaging, and then we're going to see also find some very, very new techniques. Hi also to Christopher, I can see you now. So welcome everyone, and it's very important, do feel free to comment. I want this session to be really, really interactive. There are no stupid questions, okay? So my whole desk is packed with gears and gadgets, which I will show you during the broadcast. Just let me know if you hear me loud and clear, and do interact, do participate. It's really, really important for me that happens, because I want you to feel good about this and that you get something out of it that will be beneficial. Just jumping back to episode 11, Saturn, which was really exciting, I did, and I hope you saw that, I did give in the link for downloading all the images. I put the videos. Some of you may have been able to assemble them. Let me know if they were of any good. I haven't attempted it. I don't know if the videos were of high enough quality. I do have more videos, by the way. You hear loud and clear, that's good. Hi John from Ohio. Ready to learn about your tips? Well, you're very welcome. It's been so exciting, really so exciting. The last weeks and days have been super exciting. I'll let you know why. So give me some feedback, please, about Saturn. I don't know if it made any sense, if any of you have been trying to compile an image of it. I haven't done it yet. But we have lots of videos. I think we have about 3, 4, 5 gigabytes of extra video. If any of you are interested in that, I can make that available. It'll take me a bit of time to download it from Australia, from the server, but I'm very willing to do that. Hi Pablo from Belgium. So let me give you a little bit of exciting things what we're going to do in Season 2. Well, a big thing has come up yesterday. National Geographic, or actually on Wednesday evening, National Geographic approached me because I compiled a very unique image, and there's a publication that has just been released last night. See the awesome march of the Milky Way across the night. If you're interested in reading that, just Google National Geographic and my name Zasse, and you can read the article on how I did this. Hi from Scotland. Mark is also there, my friend. Very good. That's my wonderful friend in Snohomish, Washington. Good to see you all. Hi from Scotland. I hope you have some good weather. Hi from Colorado, also for David. Good to see you all. Great that you joined. So I will be covering this special technique that I used in one of the episodes in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So do stay tuned. This is I would call this astro art in a very fascinating way, something you can only do on the Southern Hemisphere. So if you get a chance, just see the awesome march of the Milky Way across the night sky. Very good. Okay, we will also be doing some galaxies, globular clusters, more of curious and rare objects. So we certainly will have an interesting lineup of episodes, and again, your participation is most welcome and very, very important. So let's jump right in. DSLR equipment, and a lot of this is going to be very hands-on and practical. I have 2 cameras here, and I hope they'll be good enough. So let me first show you a little bit of what we're going to do here. So astrophotography has really been the domain for DSLRs, and of course there are also mirrorless cameras. I will get into mirrorless cameras just in a moment, but very common. You can get them across all the price ranges. Starting with the Canon, you can really start your astrophotography for a budget of $1,000. So I've just named some of the typical equipment that you would find for both Canon and Nikon, and I don't really have any preference of Canon or Nikon. They are all very good and very, very established. So as you go up the price range, you come to the Canon 6D and then to the 7D Mark II. It just has better sensors with lower noise and better resolution. And then if you really go to the top range, and I'll be talking about this special camera also because I have it right in front of me, is the Nikon D810A. Unfortunately very expensive. It is very similar to the Nikon D810. It's actually the identical model. All they have done is they've taken a filter away to basically give the camera the full range for the red. Okay. So, if it comes, and just throw in your question, yeah, let me just tell you something about Sony. As you know, mirrorless cameras, and especially Sony, has excellent sensors. But recently I saw a disturbing blog that was mentioning that Sony did an update in their firmware, and that takes away a lot of the stars as noise. Well, that is absolutely devastating for the astrophotographer. I hope that Sony has done something about this. I cannot comment on it. Anyway, this is only hearsay, but I just wanted to point out, be careful Sony is absolutely excellent. I don't want to say anything against Sony, but just be careful when you do choose a Sony A7 and you go and set out to do some night photography. Be sure that the firmware issue has been resolved. Otherwise you're going to have big disappointments. You're going to see hardly any stars. That brings me to the size. Okay, so we're going to talk a lot about the lenses, the size, but let's start with the screen size. This is a very interesting comparison I've found, which just gives you a rough idea, of course. And it basically says the wider your lens, the bigger your picture. And we all know that. So this is just an indication. Typically, if you do DSLR photography and you use a tripod, typically for unguided images, and unguided images means that you don't worry about the rotation of the Earth relative to the sky. It gives you some guidance of what you can use. Typically you would go till about 35 millimeters, sometimes even to 50 millimeters, but it gets more and more tricky the more magnification you have. With 50 millimeters you're looking at a 1-to-1 ratio of object to reality, and it may get a little bit tight, but I'll be covering some of these lenses. There are also, and that you can see on the next slide, some indications of typical lenses, and you can see there is what they call on the right column an Untracked Astro photo rating. So this is interesting. I don't completely agree with the way they've rated it, but I think the idea is completely correct. So what they've done is they look at the aperture, that is how much light can come in, and then they calculate the angular area. But the angular area is actually a function of the focal length divided by the diameter, which is f/d, so they're actually doing the same again, and then they are double scoring that. So it's a bit of a strange way of doing it, but still you can, you get a good idea of how to do this, and what lenses to look for. And it goes all the way from the 8mm, which I've never used. That must be an incredibly wide, almost an all-sky camera, all the way to the 50mm. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold. I'm just going to have a sip of water. And you can see they give certain scores. What is interesting is look down. Let me see if I can get my arrow here in. Yes, there we go. There's the arrow. If you come to the 24mm f1.4, that is my absolute favorite lens, and that was the picture I showed right in the beginning, and I'll show it to you back. Scores rather high. I absolutely agree with that. That lens, the 24 f1.4, is one of the most brilliant lenses. I have a Nikon on that, and I'm sure Canon has equivalents to that. Is absolutely outstanding. Absolutely outstanding lens, super sharp, and an absolute joy to work with, and it is super fast. So that's the beginning. We'll get to settings anyway, but I wanted to give you this type of rating table so you have some indication. I think the untracked astrophoto ratings are valid, and it gives you an indication. I mean, interesting also is, I had that with my friend Mark Horner recently, the discussion, is there such a thing as a 50mm fast lens? And you can see the f2 and the f1.4, the f1.4 scores rather high. But those are manual lenses as far as I know. Nikon, for example, does not produce an autofocus lens. But autofocus is not that important for astrophotography anyway. Okay, so let's get to the nitty-gritty parts. What I'm going to talk now, and I've got my whole table full of equipment, and please jump in with comments. Let's go through the tripod head, remote shutter, and I hope I can remember all this. The lighting, batteries, GPS, humidity, everything we have to deal with. And I'm going to switch over now. I hope you can see me now to the live view. I've got two cameras there. I've got one here and one close-up, so I can show you all kinds of different views. And I hope the resolution is going to be satisfactory today. So let's start right with the tripod, okay? So I've got so much stuff next to me. So I'm going to grab, like Father Christmas, I'm going to take all these gadgets out and show them to you. Okay, so this is the first thing, the tripod. Well, if you want to stay in the low budget region, a simple tripod with the typical, the typical Manfrotto that you have, and I'm sure you've seen all of these, with already a mount all in it, and you can completely maneuver it, is completely satisfactory. As long as it's a stable mount, you can even mount very good cameras on it. And what's very important for night photography is, of course, the complete flexibility, so that you can look vertically up into the sky. Really, really important. Really important. So this is very good. It has, as you can see, you have complete flexibility in, well, what we would call right ascension, right? So the right ascension, and then also the declination. Very, very nice and completely handy, very light. Would use it any time. Only disadvantage I see is that the head, if you use two cameras, then you have to, well, you could actually buy two adapters. It may be a little bit tricky. I sometimes don't like the lever that they use here. It's a little bit of a tricky lever. I mean, maybe it's just me, but this release button does work, but it can be a bit tricky at night, a little bit tricky at night. Remember, you're at night, and that's what we'll also come to lighting. So that can be a little bit tricky. By the way, a technique I did want to show you is very, very important when you do night photography. Let's say you are photographing the whole Milky Way, okay, the whole Milky Way, and you're starting really from horizon, and that's typically what I had in Australia, from one horizon to the other. And you want to photograph everything, and let's say you have a 24mm lens, and you really want to cover everything. You want to stitch the image together later, a beautiful mosaic, which you can do. It's very, very important then that you use your tripod very diligently and you do lots of overlap. Typically images for mosaic should have an overlap of 20 to 30% at least, okay? So make sure you have ample room, and then you would basically start you would start in a horizontal position. So I have to turn it around like this, in a horizontal position, looking at one horizon, and you slowly go vertical. Sorry, it would be vertical, would be in this case this way, okay? Vertical until it's completely vertical, and then what you have to do is you have to turn your head 180 degrees, and it's very, very important to do this 180-degree turn accurately. So what you do is you have to stand in front of the camera, and you go to the other side, and then you turn this exactly 180 degrees around. This is a technique I use, and it has to be very, very precise. And then you take another picture of the night sky, and what you'll find is that the image is inverted and also upside down. Okay, it's inverted. I think it's flipped horizontally and vertically. That's what I'm saying. Okay, and then you go on, and then you slowly lift it, and you then from there go all the way to the other horizon. That way you can cover the whole Milky Way from basically one horizon to the next. Very nice technique to use. So you go up like that, all the way to the zenith, and then you flip it around 180 degrees, take exactly the same picture so that you know where you stopped, and it works very nice, and then you slowly lift it that way. And if you do that in a coordinated manner, which is really important, because when the night sky is clear, you have to take every possibility you can find. You know, you don't want to mess things up. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. This tripod recommended. Then come, of course, the higher grade tripods. If you then have more expensive equipment, and that's the next thing I'm going to go. I'm just going to go jump back to my list here. No, sorry, here was my list. The tripod head, yes. So in the camera that we've just seen, in the tripod we've just seen, the tripod head is indeed integrated. However, if you're using, if you want to be flexible with equipment and so on, then what you do is you use a so-called Arca Swiss mount. An Arca Swiss mount, many of you will know. That is the very common called Arca Swiss mount. You can see it. You can easily mount it to cameras. They also have brackets, by the way. I never use a bracket. That's my own preference. But I know many good photographers, they use a bracket, a so-called L bracket, also as an Arca Swiss, whereby they can change from horizontal to vertical, to a vertical picture. Okay, very, very easily. I don't use it for good reasons. And now let's get to the tripod head. A beautiful tripod head that I really loved, and I used it a lot, is a Ballhead. And I'm just going to change the camera view so you can see this better. But that is the type of head I used. It has very, very good reviews, excellent reviews, and I really agree with it. As long as your camera is light, you cannot put heavy gear on it because you're going to have a lot of leverage, and if you will struggle at night with a leverage. Even from, as soon as your equipment gets heavy, it gets very unpleasant. However, it's really nice because you have these big knobs which are good at night to use. You have these very, very big knobs, and you can actually adjust the friction. So if I just adjust the mount a little bit, you can see the ball head will have more or less friction. Very pleasant to use at night. So you can just give it enough friction, so you just have to move it into a new position and you don't have to worry about it. So it just counterbalances the weight. Very pleasant to use. Another nice thing about this type of ball head is that it has, in this case, an independent right ascension. Okay, independent right ascension. So once you're in position and you need to move your camera a little bit, well, in the right ascension way, you can just move it angularly around, which is very, very helpful. Okay, so I found this type of ball head very good. Plus, of course, you can rotate the whole ball head around on your tripod, and then you have the independent rotation once you locked it to really give a nice perspective. Good gear, as long as it's not too heavy. And then you can go one step further even, and I have this actually not so much for astrophotography, but if you really have heavier equipment, and unfortunately this is really expensive, you're talking about $2,000 now, but beautiful to use if you do solar imaging like I do and you want to scan across the sun. So this is called the Arca Cube, available from B&H, and you can see it's a cube. It looks incredibly complex, but it is geared. What does geared mean? Geared means that this thing can hold up to 70 pounds, and you can easily, really finely adjust your camera, and you can move across the surface. You can frame your image absolutely accurately, which is a beautiful thing to use. As I said, I use it for solar imaging, and I also use it when I do use a 300 or bigger millimeter lens, and I have a guided image. I want to take a guided image of the sky, because you very, very well frame, and you don't have to worry about the weight of the lens. As I said, it takes 70 pounds. So the way it works is you would typically mount this on a tripod, and you can readjust the angle roughly first, then you lock it, and then, as you can see, I hope you can see this, but I can now move the declination up and down. You see, I can move the declination up and down here. Very, very fine adjustments, which is really fine. And then it's got another one, and that is the horizontal one. So this is this is more or less like a rocking chair in the other direction. So very, very fine. Plus, now comes the nice thing, that you can also rotate the top part where your camera is mounted independently too. So really fine, fine-tuned, and it's geared. That is the really nice thing I like, because the problem with the heavy lenses is already a 1 to 400 millimeter. It's so heavy, and if you're at night, my goodness, you have to watch out. You make mistakes, and you get very irritated with yourself when you're trying to image something and do it beautifully. But this device is the absolute ace of. I can only recommend it. It took me a long time to think whether I should invest in this device, but I have no regrets, absolutely no regrets, because it is the king of kings. The only thing you have to watch out for is you cannot be negligent and just throw this into the car. A ball head like this, you can leave it on the floor and so on. This is a geared device, so you've got to be careful. You have to handle it the same way you do with a camera. It comes actually together with a, it's going to get a nice leather case. So what I always do is, after I do my astrophotography, I always put this away very neatly so that the gears are not damaged. So watch out for that. And I think where you would run into problems, I have not done that, is don't knock over your tripod at night. Well, it's not good for your camera, but in this case, I think the geared device would suffer from it. Okay, whilst this or another tripod head is okay, it'll get some scratches, but is unlikely to get damaged because the mechanical devices here are not so shock sensitive. Good. So we covered the tripod heads. If there are any questions, just roll them in. I will go back to my list now, and let's have a look. So yes, next point, remote shutter. Very interesting. I'm going to just grab my bag. I've got so much gear here, and see where my remote shutter is. 1 second. There are different types of remote shutters. There we go. Okay, let me show you the remote shutters. So typically, you can use a simple remote shutter that just and you can get it for $5. It just attaches to your camera in front. At the Nikon, the remote shutter is basically it just comes in here at the front. That's where the remote shutter goes. I'll talk about the lenses in a moment. Okay, so we'll get to that. But anyway, remote shutter is important, of course, because of the vibration. If you don't have a remote shutter, it's not the end of the world. Because what you do is you program a delay. You just program a delay in here, and the delay will take care of everything. I did that. I've done it without remote shutter. You put a 1 second delay, so you press the shutter, wait a second, and after a second the picture's taken. You're fine, no problem. Okay. So if you've forgotten the remote shutter, the only thing where you will regret having a remote shutter is if your camera doesn't have the possibility to do interval night shots, for example. If you're taking consecutive time lapses, which are beautiful, time-lapse photography, I find the Nikon extremely difficult to program. I've never ever figured it out. Can you believe it? I'm an electrical engineer. I have not figured out how to do the interval timer on the Nikon. I've heard that the Canon has much more user-friendly menus, and so does I think the Sony too. But that's why you would use just an external shutter. $5 or $10 it costs, but you just lock the shutter and then it just rattles off all night. Okay, so much for that point. Yes, next point, lighting and batteries. Really important point. And then we'll get to the, let me just see, I've got all the settings. Yeah, then we'll get to the lenses and everything. Okay, so let's go to the lighting. Now lighting is lighting is the key thing, and you may have seen my one live broadcast. This is a very good headlamp that you can get, and you can buy it off Amazon. Okay, it's really useful, because you can see the way I'm wearing it. It covers your head very nicely. You can put it on. It's got these different. It's incredibly intense, It's got these horrible blinking psychedelic lights on too. I don't know why they use them. Nobody's going to go blink like crazy. Everybody's going to everybody's going to go crazy when they when you use this type of blink. You know, I don't know why they've done this. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. But anyway, that's the only silly thing. But the lamp here is really excellent. I think it costs about $30 or $40. It's called Eris Park of Amazon. I hope this is not mirror inverted now and you can see this, but it's called Eris Park. I had a bit of problems this morning with the camera. Sometimes the webcams invert, and so I don't know if the writing is inverted, but if you cannot read it, it's called Eris Park. Okay, very nice to use. Got a rechargeable battery, which is really nice. Just plug into a USB and off you go, and it holds all the night. Hi Jürgen from Belgium, good to have you here. If you missed the beginning, don't worry, we're still going to come to the lenses. I've just talked about tripod heads. Now I'm getting to the lights. Another thing that's very nice just for the night is these very powerful LEDs. The efficiencies become so... Oh, it's inverted. Thanks, Ian. It's inverted. I apologize for that because it's really weird. It's some software error, I think, in Wirecast. When I restarted the camera, the whole image becomes inverted, and let me see if I can invert the... You know what? Let's just try if I can invert the image here. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to rotate myself around here. And let's see if you can read it now. 1 second. So I'm going to give you something to read now. Where was my lamp? And see if maybe it's not inverted anymore. Can you read this now? I hope this comes out, Ian, this comes out correctly now. So thank you for telling me it was inverted. Eris Park, hopefully you can read it. I know there's a delay, so just give me a sign. If it is not inverted, well, then I'll have to invert it in some other way. Hopefully it's not mirror inverted anymore. Okay, good. So let's see what, so you got this lamp. There's something I wanted to tell you about lighting, which is really nice. If you look at this image here, you can see I lit up the foreground, okay? And that gives beautiful things because if you, oh, it's good now, Ian, thank you. So if you light up the foreground, for goodness sakes, do not take the cold LED lightings. Do not take the flashing lamp for cyclists, exactly. Yes, that's right, Christopher. And yes, thanks, Mark. So don't take the cold LED lights. What I've used is really simple. You cannot believe it, but what I did is I used my camper van and I just I worked out the perfect lighting, and the perfect lighting was typically, and I'll come to the exposures in a second in the settings, but let's say you're doing a 30-second exposure. That's enough time. So I trigger my exposure, walk to the car, which is parked a few meters away, and then I would just put on the parking lights, just the parking lights for 1 second and off. And that gives beautiful illumination. Why? Because those are the old-fashioned incandescent lights. Soon they'll disappear off all cars and then it's not going to be so nice anymore. But they give this warm light. If you use an LED light, it's going to be cold and it's going to spoil your image. This is my personal view, but I like warm light. So if you hunt for... Oh no, now that has shifted. Let me just see what's going on here. 1 second. That is strange. 1 second. Why is this shifted now? I'm not sure. Oh, but 1 second, my camera just moved a little bit. I can see what's happened. Okay, just give me a second. Let's see if this is going to work again. Yeah, that's better. Well, that's sort of better. It's not quite better. What has happened is through the heat, I'm using, talking about lamps and light, I'm actually using, well, I'll leave it for this now. I'll just duck a little bit. The Logitech camera has actually moved the tape that I put around it to fix it, has actually got so warm through the lighting in order so that you could see it properly. So as you can see, I'm not perfect in any way. Okay, but anyway, the old-fashioned the old-fashioned incandescent light is wonderful. These torches are hardly available anymore, but that's another thing for light painting. If you do light painting and you have these modern LED cars, or you don't have a car around where you can just use the parking lights, these old-fashioned lights are very, very beautiful. So you can just do light painting with them. Again, anything. I think there are also LEDs on the market now, but I'm not aware of the details that emulate the warm sort of incandescent sunlight that you have. But these old-fashioned torches are marvelous to use. Okay, of course not for walking. For your own case, use the strong LED lights so you can find your way around. But for light painting, this object like this in the foreground, you can beautifully light paint with a torch. Okay, very good. Now we've gone through that. We've gone through lighting. Now the next thing I want to talk about is batteries. Now batteries is a big thing. Okay, it's a big thing because you're out in the dark, and by the way, there's another beautiful light I wanted to show you. It's a omnidirectional light, LED. You get it also off Amazon. This is called, here, let me just go to the front before I forget it. That's another very nice one. It's called, I can't even pronounce it, Etexity, or whatever the pronunciation would be. Very nice because you just open and close it, and you can actually, by moving it physically up and down vertically, you can increase or decrease the amount of light that is used. Very nice, very long lasting, very robust, very robust. Take AA batteries, very nice to use. I had a lot of success with that. Okay. So now the next thing is batteries. My goodness, batteries is a big topic because it is the absolute pain of a photographer. And let me just get my camera back here. Batteries. I now use, especially for night photography, battery packs on everything. You can see it's got this huge, rather clumsy, ugly looking battery pack on it. This is the 810, and I actually found a battery mount on it. Really worth doing it because with the battery pack you can go through the whole night. If you're doing time-lapse images, the temperature often drops at night and your batteries suffer. So always make sure that is the case. If you have the luxury of having a power cord, then get a power adapter. I used that for this beautiful time lapse that I did. I didn't even trust the batteries, and I didn't want to stay up all night. I put my camera on auto mode, and it took images the whole night. And then in that case, I used an external cord actually to feed power to the battery. It's just a part that goes into the battery pack. Okay, but this would probably last all night up till now. I've never tested it because actually the consumption for the camera is not very large, because every 30 seconds the shutter is opening and closing, and that's also the battery consumption is very low. Very different is when you're using live view. Okay, when you're using live view, then the battery consumption of course is very high. Okay, here you can see that's just looking at the horizon. Oops, I have to be careful because it's all mirror inverted. But that's really the killer for the so if you do any video work at night. Good. So we covered batteries now. Also very important, if you have any other devices, is take USB adapters and batteries. You can get them off Amazon, and it's really very convenient way to do it. GPS, isn't that a crazy topic? GPS, why am I mentioning GPS? Well, one thing that's really important for night photography, especially when you have moving object, is the exact time. So make sure that your camera, especially when you move somewhere else, is synchronized by the second. And I'm being very precise about that. When I went to Australia, I actually, and can you believe it, top cameras like Nikon or Canon do not have an integrated GPS, which is absolutely crazy. You find every cheap camera has that. What I did is, I didn't buy the crazy GPS adapter. I found, and I cannot, let me see where my GPS adapter is. That's my GPS adapter. So it's another gadget. I think I bought it for $70 or $80. It's just a plug-in for GPS, and it's got a red and green light, and it turns green when your GPS is synchronized. Okay, very nice, because then you synchronize the time and you make sure that it's synchronized by the second, because you will find that later the time is extremely important. I found that when you do time lapse and you think, what happened there? And you can also later use the time lapse. For example, if you're doing time lapse on the Milky Way, then the exact synchronization of time is beautiful, because the sky moves 2 hours per month. Okay, it's 24 hours, so 360 degrees, so it's 2 hours every month. And then you can easily work out the exact position of the Milky Way. Of course, you can say, well, you can use Astro software for that too. But very often, you look at your own images and you can work out these things much easier from an image. So that's why to have a GPS very handy. And the modern cameras, I think Sony and so on, already have integrated GPSs. So just something to watch out for. This is the make that I found very reliable. Okay, good GPS. Good. Then I'm rushing through this. Humidity, oh my goodness. Talk about humidity, what a nightmare. This is, when you come to lenses, you will find that humidity can play a major role. I had this experience in Siding Spring. The humidity suddenly jumped to 90%, and in no time, these beautiful wide-angle lenses were clogged up. And the wider it gets, the worse. It gets especially bad if you have a fisheye. A fisheye like this, you haven't got a chance. Don't even start cleaning it before you've cleaned it, because the thermal gradient is so large, and you're using the whole surface of the lens, that it's impossible to clean. If you use a less wide-angle lens like this one, where you still have some at least some insulation towards the lens surface, is not going to clog up so quickly. But if the humidity gets very high, you're also going to struggle. You might have to clean it every 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, so humidity can be a real issue. So an absolute no-no for the fisheye lens. Impossible. What are the ways? How can you get around it? Well, of course, those of you who are running telescopes will know we use a dew heater. Dew heaters work. You can get dew heaters. I don't have any suggestions at the moment what type of dew heater to use, but you can Google it. So if you are, for example, in England, I know that very well. When I was in England, you have lots of dew. You can get it's a simple wraparound coil that you use, and you attach it to a battery, and you just need to heat it slightly up, and that will prevent condensation on the lens. So very useful to have if you have high humidity. Yeah, that covers it. Now let's get to the most exciting part, getting right back to the lenses. Okay, let's talk about lenses, and then we'll get to the settings. So I actually am using 3 different types of lenses, and I've been using them very successfully. I'll start off with the 14mm that I have here. This is my 14mm Rokinon lens. Costs a few $100s and is absolutely superb. I prefer using prime lenses as opposed to zoom lenses. As you know, zoom lenses, you can zoom over a range. There are good zoom lenses too. They're very good. Nikon makes very good zoom lenses from 14 to 24mm, and I'm not saying anything against it, but it's my preference is to use prime lenses, simply because they are ultra sharp, and I don't want to touch the zoom at night, really. Although it depends on your preference. But this is a good alternative. I think Rokinon makes superb. Well, I just have to watch out because everything is mirror inverted here. Makes superb lenses. This is a 14mm, and it's very easy to use. Very nice on the 14mm lens is the focus is very forgiving. So here I don't even have to do any adjustments, because focus is a major problem, by the way. Really a major problem at night. We'll get into focus in a second, but here I just go basically to the settings of. Let's see if I can show you that. Where is infinity? There we go. Here's infinity. There's the settings for infinity, and I just go a notch back. and it'll always be sharp because it's very forgiving. It's a wide angle lens, and at that focal length, no problem. And it's always sharp, okay? So that's a beautiful lens to use. I'll show you a picture I've done with a 14mm lens. So that is the result. So you can see Sagittarius there beautifully. That's with a 36 megapixel camera with superb resolution, okay? Absolutely superb resolution. You can zoom into the picture and you get beautifully round stars. Very, very nice. Highly commendable. And if you start off with astrophotography, if you use that lens and only that lens, you are going to be very, very happy. That's how I started. I never took other lenses, and you're going to be ultra happy with this lens. I can really say that. Let me just scale out again so you can see the whole. You can see approximately the 14mm lens covers a wide range of the Milky Way. Good. Now the other lens that I recently bought, and I bought it secondhand, is very interesting. It's a 16mm, and that's a fisheye. Interesting. So you would say, well, a 16mm has to have less field of view than the 40mm. No, but this is a fisheye. Very interesting. It's a manual. I think this is also, this is also an autofocus, but it's an older model of Nikon. I absolutely love it. I bought it secondhand. By the way, a lot of lenses I recommend to you to buy them secondhand, because lenses often trade very, very well, as opposed to cameras which deteriorate in value very quickly due to the sensor technology that catches up so quickly, right? Very nice lens to use. As I said, the only problem is when you have dew, it's useless. But let's assume you have dry condition, which should be most of the time. This is superb. Again, the setting's very simple. It's very, very light, and I'll show you the same picture now with a 16mm lens. Now you can see that is a superb image for a 16mm. You can see the Milky Way beautifully of the southern hemisphere, and you can see the large Magellanian cloud there. Absolutely beautiful resolution all the way. It's amazing. With such a wide, you can even make out, and I'm just going to take the arrow here just at the edge. If I see this correctly, right here is the famous Tarantula Nebula. Absolutely amazing detail for a 16mm lens for such a wide field. So absolutely highly recommendable lens, and again you can get this second hand. Okay, well, that was the sorry, let's just jump back and scale this back. Oh, sorry, what did I do now? I must have moved it. Yeah, I must have moved the center. 1 second. Scale it back so you can see the scale of the image again. There we go. Let me center it properly and then rescale it. So there we go. Yes, that's fine. And you can see it took the whole camper van, the whole sky. Absolutely my favorite lens for time-lapse. If you have a good resolution camera, you're going to love it. You're absolutely going to love it. The pictures that I did for National Geographic are done with the 16mm lens. I can only praise I can only praise this lens non-stop. It's wonderful. And that brings us to the final lens that I use, and that's a 24mm one. That's a 24mm. This is the super fast, super friend. I absolutely love this lens. It's a 24. Let me see if I can get this into focus for you. It's a 24mm f1.4. Very, very, very fast. Well, what does fast mean is that basically it's so wide angled, so extremely fast that you don't have to worry about time. It's super sharp. It's super sharp. Should have very few problems with condensation, and highly reliable. Only disadvantage, focus is so difficult. Brings me to the next point. How do you focus? And that is quite an issue. I spend a lot of time at night making sure everything's focused. I'm so careful that even when I move a lens to another spot, I will make sure my focus is correct, Because if you are going to go to such an extreme case, let's say you go to Moab, to Utah, you go to Australia, wherever you may be, Hawaii, and so on, Chile. There are so many beautiful places where you can use. Also in Canada, you can go to Alberta, to Banff, and some beautiful nature reserves. You'll be frustrated if you don't focus properly. I've seen many people make this mistake, spend a lot of time focusing. There are different ways to focus. If you have difficulties to focus at night, then put your camera on focus your camera during the day on a distant object, and then put tape across, so it's locked. Make sure that thing is never moved, and that'll be fine. I don't believe that any thermal issues will change the focus a lot at night. Okay, that may be so for telescopes, but I think for a lens you'll be fine. If you have the luxury of having a good camera, such as this one, you'll be able to zoom in on or not zoom in, to look at a large, at a bright stars such as Sirius, Polaris, and so on are fairly bright stars. You usually will find one. Sometimes you find a distant city where you can also focus on, and then you can use the inbuilt LED center, the LCD screen at the back, and then you can really. Let me just switch on the camera and get to a picture here. Let's see if we can find a picture. Yep, yeah, I've got a picture just to show you. And then what you do is you really zoom in like crazy. And you really you disable the autofocus, which I do here, by the way. There's a switch here by the Nikon. I disable the autofocus function, and then you make sure that your stars are nice and round. Really important. Hello from England, tuned in late again. Okay, hi GeoCarry. It's never too late to enjoy. Okay, good to see you. So make sure your stars are nice and round, and fine tune it. So the 24mm is exceptionally sensitive to focus. I refocus it every time I start a new series, and it's been very, very rewarding, because the images I took were absolutely outstanding. So let me show you what the 24mm looks like. This is a picture of the 24mm, and you can see, again, your picture looks completely different. It really makes the Milky Way pop out. So you take a beautiful image, as I said, you illuminate it in front with some incandescent light, either you use your parking lights or so, and then it looks absolutely stunning. You can zoom in and get an incredible, really absolutely incredible. You can see slight drift here of the sky, but it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. By the way, let's see, what am I just zooming in there? What is this? Is that the Eta Carina? Let me see, I think. No, wait a second. This is not the Eta Carina. This is, now I'm lost for a moment. I can see the Lagoon and the Trifid Nebula on the top right, by the way. This looks to me, yeah, that is right. That is the Lagoon and the Trifid Nebula. I'll just zoom in. You can see, it's amazing, isn't it? How, well, I'm rotating the image. Hang on 1 second. Just got the setting wrong. Let me just jump back on my image and zoom in now. But I just made it out here. Sometimes it's so difficult when you zoom in to find the place where it is. Yeah, there it is. That looks to me like that is the Lagoon Nebula. See how beautiful the colors come out, and there, just moving the arrow, that is the Trifid Nebula, really coming out neat on the 24 with the 24mm lens. Very, very nice. So let's zoom out again. Just let me bring the picture back in. And zoom out completely, put it in the center, and then zoom out again. Now that's about right. Take the arrow away, and you can see absolutely stunning compositions. Okay, I did very little tweak to this image. I didn't even process it. I think this is actually the original as it came out. Okay, very nice. So let's go let's now talk about camera settings. So we talked about the lens, we talked about how important focus is, and now let's talk about settings. That's a really important subject. Settings. So what are my recommended settings? Nowadays, cameras usually have very little noise, and you can actually use any ISO up to 6400. You'll get away with it. You can do later noise reduction in post-processing, usually with 6400 ISOs. The older cameras, you may have to go down with the ISO, but you'll be fine. I talked a lot about focus already, so I won't repeat that again. One thing to say is about white balance. Now, what color is the sky? That is an interesting question. If you look what astronomers recommend, they're talking somewhere, I think the color of the sky was somewhere around 4800 Kelvin, if I recall correctly. But I use the white balance of 4500 Kelvin. It makes the sky a little bit more bluish. Later, and that's why I recommend to shoot in RAW, if you can. If your camera allows shooting in RAW and in manual, do it, because you can always easily correct the white balance there. So it doesn't matter what preset you use a white balance when you shoot the shot, when you shoot the image, you will always be able to adjust it. Aperture. Open it as wide as possible, and if you wish so, and you're a little bit conservative, you can pull it back one stop to maybe take a little bit of the spherical aberration or inconsistencies of the lens away. But many top lenses you don't need to do it. You can shoot wide open. And one thing that's really important, don't forget to take sufficient memory cards with you. If you have a high-res camera like I do, like this one, 36 megapixel, that's 40 megabytes per picture, you're going to consume this like crazy. So make sure you have both the slots filled with sufficient memory cards, 64 gigabytes or 128. Don't save on memory cards. And make sure you have you always have enough memory cards with you, because sometimes memory cards break down, the pins bend. You've seen this before, I'm sure. And be sure that you have enough memory cards with you. And of course the adapters with that. Okay, I just have to think if I covered the main points. Now I'm just looking to see, making sure that I covered everything. Let me think. If you have any questions, please throw them in. You know, I don't want you to be stunned here like mummies, wondering what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go to one other subject, but I hope I covered everything. I'm just trying to think about the batteries, the settings, the focus. Oh yes, exposure time. You see, now I know what I forgot to talk about. Exposure time, exposure time, exposure time. That's the most important. Exposure time. That the exposure time is sort of put here in this table. No, it's actually not in this table, but there's this famous, what they call this the 500 rule, which is really simple. The 500 rule says, take the number 500 and divide it by the focal length of your lens. So let's say this is 24 millimeters, let's say it's 25 millimeters, and that gives you the exposure time. So you take 500 millimeters, you divide it by 25, which is 4 times 5, which is 20. So this will be okay. 4? Yeah, 4 times, yeah, that's right. This will be okay for 20-second exposure. If you're more conservative like me, you take the 360 rule, which says 360 divided by the 24, which gives you approximately 15 seconds. Best way to do it is to do a test. You take an image, you really explode the image and see, is the star trail satisfactory for me? If it is, you're fine. If not, go a little bit down. Now there's one interesting thing I do want to tell you about exposure. I was very surprised. I took one mistake, and I did a few mistakes, of course that happens, at ISO 200 instead of 6400. And it looked like the images were completely dark. Well, when I went to Lightroom and I really pulled up the exposure, the image was very, very usable. Maybe not as usable as if I had taken the full dynamic range at 6400. But what I'm going to say to you is, the remote control from PC. That's another great subject, and I'll bring it up in a second. I will bring it up. That's a great subject, Christopher. I'll bring it up. Just lost my thread. 1 second. What was I talking about? I lost my thread. I just saw your remote. My fault. Anyway, so what was I going to say? 1 second. Sorry, I lost my thread. I get so involved with this. Yes, we were talking about speed, exactly. So as long as your stars are perfectly round, you're fine, okay? Sometimes they don't even have to be perfectly round, but that's the best way to test it. The wide-angle lenses are very, very forgiving. The 50mm lens, and as the higher your magnification, the less forgiving they are. And what I want to say about the ISO, your ISO is extremely forgiving. I took this image at 200 ISO. And my goodness, I was completely surprised that you can actually get a lot out of them. So rather go down with the ISO than to use longer exposures. If you really find, my goodness, my exposure, I have to shorten it, go down with the ISO, even if your picture looks fairly dark at the back. If you bring it to Lightroom, you have a lot of possibilities. That's what I found out. So that's really my tip. Don't worry so much. Rather go down with the ISO and in order to compensate for any star movements. Okay, we'll get to Christopher's subject. 1 second, let's do it. Remote control for PSC. For the PC, there's a very nice program called, which I have just about started to use. I'm just going to bring it up now. Let's see if I can move it to the other screen. 1 second. They are different. It's called Backyard Nikon. I think there's also Backyard Canon. I'm just bringing it up and I'm hoping to move it to the other screen. Let me just do this quickly. Yeah, here we go. I'm just going to share my other screen again with you. So, this is what it's called, Backyard Nikon. Very, very nice software. I think it costs $20, $30 or $50 depending on what edition you have. But really love it. Really love it. Because this is connected with a USB cable, and you can do incredibly sensitive adjustments to focus here. You can do all the, if you're going to do interval shooting, you can pre-program everything this way. I have not used it yet, simply because in Australia I was, I was really in the middle of nowhere doing a lot of images. But if you have the luxury that you can take your PC along, I would strongly advise you to use this to remotely control your camera. Backyard Nikon, it's called Backyard Canon, has all the tweaks that you need for planetary, for astrophotography, beautiful settings and so on. Even if you want to use a telescope, a filter, focuser, way beyond what you need for DSLRs, but it's got very, very nice focusing routines, which are built on statistics. Can highly recommend it. Then comes geocarry. Yeah, exposure time. Yes, and exposure time. I did mention, yes, exposure time. That was the 500 rule. I hope that answers your question. Waternish 99 about exposure time. So the exposure time depends on the focal length, and you use the 500 or 360 rule, which I just mentioned. So you just take the let's say you have a 25mm lens, you take the number 500 divided by 25 and you come to 20. That gives you the exposure, maximum exposure times of 20 seconds. If you're conservative, you go down to 15 seconds, okay? But all this goes very, very well. Now comes geocarry. Do you ever use Star Tracker? Now we come to the next topic. You know, you're right bang on, because that's going to be my final that's going to be my final topic. What about tracking? What about tracking? Yes, that's a subject. Thanks for mentioning it. So now, and this is the final thing that I've got on my floor, the Astro Tracker. The Astro Tracker. Now you're looking at longer focal lengths, and you will need tracking because your sky is moving so quickly. There comes my favorite thing, the Astro Tracker. Look how light it is. Extremely beautiful product built in England. Astrotrack. Oops, there we go, the mirror inversion always. Have to be careful. Astrotrack is what it's called. Love it, absolutely love it. Have used it. Tracks beautifully. Very light. Looks really strange, doesn't it? When you first look at it, it looks really strange. Think, what is this? I could never figure it out. Well, it's really simple. So, at the back, and let me just get my battery pack out. So what it has, it's got this external battery pack of AA batteries, which plug in here at the back. And you can hear it goes beep, beep, beep. And there it is. And so once it's mounted, what it does, it tracks for about 2 hours. Yeah, you're complaining, you're talking to me. I know it's complaining, okay? So usually what you would do, and I'll try and just hold this without it complaining. Now let's see if I can get this going. Yes, you can hear it. You can hear it actually move. So initially when you initiate it, the battery drives a linear motor and you can hear it moving along and it gives you a beep and then you're ready. And then what is very important, I'll talk about alignment in a second, okay? We'll talk about alignment in a second, but here this is where you would put your typical tripod mount, and you need a good one for this. For example, you can use a good Ballhead or whatever. You mount it on there and you need a stable tripod, okay? And we'll talk about how to align it, but then let's assume it's all aligned. You can basically track with this the sun. So that's the, whoops, it's all mirror inverted. That's the sign for the sun. Then you have the moon too. You can do the sun, the moon, or the stars, where you just, and once you press start, which I'll do now, you will see, and it's, you can see it at night. I can't see it at the moment. Yeah, there's a flashing LED light. Let's see if I can show you. Oops, it's a mirror inversion always. You should be able to, yeah, you can see a bit of a flash there. That's it. There's a flashing LED light. I'm just having some problems here with the mirror inversion, but that green light tells you that you are now tracking. So what happens is this arm will move all the way till it reaches the end. I think it's about 2 hours or so, which gives you plenty of time. And then it gives a beep, comes to the end. It's very easy to readjust because all you do is you then reverse the direction, which I'll do. You press the reverse button here. And it goes back to the beginning, and then you just move your camera a bit to your object again and you restart the whole thing when it's aligned. Very beautiful to use, absolutely recommendable. Goes in your suitcase, absolutely love it. The battery pack lasts a long time. By the way, what happened to me is if this, it also exists, yes, there are different ones. It also exists. There are different models. Yes, Gerald, I think that's what you're referring to. There are definitely different models. This is the one I use, and there are other ones too that are also available. I don't know so much about them, but do have a look for them. Okay, Star Adventure, and that's a good one too. Yes, so I'm not here to promote anything. Okay, I'm just giving you my own experience, and I'm absolutely convinced that there are other models that do excellent jobs too. And there are heavier models too, if you need to use a counterbalance and so on, where the Astro Tracker is not sufficient. My goodness, there are so many different products on the market. But this is just one that I find really advisable. By the way, if you're in the States, let's switch this off. You could do a good deal getting this because you order this directly from England, because at the moment the pound is so low compared to the dollar. Okay, that's just something to throw in. So don't order it from the States, order it from England directly, and you get almost a pound to the dollar value, which helps, which including shipping actually helps quite a lot. Okay, yeah, now about alignment. That's the final thing, the lousy, a dreadful drift alignment, which we all hate. At least I absolutely hate it. I know how to do it. We've all done it with telescopes and so on. How do we align this? There are many methods. There's one, and that's called the pole master. Very interesting. If you're like me, you like high tech. If you've done drift alignment, well, drift alignment can be done. And the pole master comes with a, let me just find it. I've got so many things on the floor. Comes with an eyepiece that is illuminated, and you actually look through it, and then you can do this dreadful neck-breaking drift alignment, especially, you know, if you're on a low latitude. You really have to strain your neck, or sometimes a high latitude. It's absolutely awful. I can remember myself bending over backwards sometimes to try and look into Polaris. Well, if this will do it, and it'll do it fine. Okay. Now, if you're a little bit more thinking, well, what's the next generation? You have something called the Polemaster. Really nice. I've used it once. Polemaster. So what is this thing? It's called Polemaster. There you can see the, oops, I have to see the make of it, Polemaster, okay? I've used it once, and what it does is the camera, and this is the camera, it's a tiny camera that locks into the arm here of the right ascension, okay? This is just used to find the pole, okay? It just locks in here. Let me just do this, if I can do this all with one hand. Comes in there. Whoops. Hang on. Just going to tighten it. There we go. There we go. There's the Polemaster in there. And it basically connects with a USB to your computer. Comes with its own software. The software is quite good. It's so-so. I think they could have improved it a little bit more. The first time I didn't quite understand it, but really easy to use. Within 2 to 3 minutes or less than 5 minutes, you have an absolute well-adjusted. So the way it works is as follows. This is a live camera, and I mean, of course, you need to see stars. So you have to roughly point it to Polaris when you're in the north. It also works in the southern hemisphere, but I haven't tested it yet. But I could demonstrate this maybe live to you once. So you roughly have Polaris in, and once you identify Polaris, it will show you a field of stars that sort of are in a ring around Polaris, and then you have to basically use the software with rings to align this exactly, that circles with the stars. Once you've done that, then the software knows, okay, I know where you are now. You have now identified the sky to me. Really easy to do. These are all bright stars around Polaris, quite a wide field. Once you've done that, you then have to choose one of the stars that are sufficiently wide away. You click on that, and then the software then you start rotating this device. You rotate it in order to give by rotating this the right ascension, it will know what your drift actually is. Okay, so you take a picture like this, you realign it. It says now move it by 30 or 40 degrees. I think it was 30 degrees. You do that, approximately 30 degrees, take another picture, and you move the you basically move the template again to match the star pattern. And by doing that, you then jump back to Polaris. So then the software understands exactly where you are, will understand the misalignment, and will then give you instructions for adjusting the declination and the right ascension accordingly, which you can do with these sometimes a little bit clumsy screws, I must say. Bolts, not easy to use. Some of the telescopes, it'll go a lot easier, that have better adjustments. Fine. That's, by the way, the thing I find a little bit cumbersome here is the adjustments on the Astrotrack. Not completely happy with that, but it does work, right? So yes, you can do excellent alignment within 3 to 5 minutes with a Polemaster. By the way, for those of you who are Mac users, I've heard that there are some problems with the Mac version. A friend of mine said the Mac doesn't work completely correctly with this. The new Retina, the Mac Retina, has some issues, but he's written to the company, and I'm sure they're working on it. Very advisable. I think costs, I don't remember, 150, 200, was it around $200 US? Is it useful? Absolutely. If you have a PC near, that's where you do need a PC, do it, because alignment is just a pain no matter how good you are, right? And this really gives you, I think an accuracy of sorry, my computer just switched off for a moment. An accuracy of about 0.5 arc seconds. My goodness, I've talked too much now. I've talked all the time. And that actually brings me to the end. I've talked more than an hour on a very favorite subject of mine. And I do hope it was helpful for you. Okay. By the way, if you want to do One last tip, you can also align things during the day. You can align them during the day. If you have a solar scope, there's this thing called Soul Master. I won't get my solar scope out now, but it's called Soul Master. Very nice. You can do beautiful alignment during the day. The right ascension is the most difficult thing to do. Well, we know where the sun is exactly at noon, at peak time. Not at noon, sorry. Where it is at peak in the zenith. What you do is you take any Astro program or you take your local newspaper and you see, I live in, I don't know, in Dallas, wherever, okay, in Dallas, when is the sun in the zenith? It'll tell you exactly, well, at 1:08 p.m. summertime, it is in the zenith. And then you can take the Soul Master, which is wonderful, and you can align it, and you can actually get the incredibly precise right ascension by just looking at the shadow of the sun. So, because then you know exactly where south is, exactly where south is. So you can do a beautiful alignment during the day if you hate alignment at the night. Then you still have the latitude, but the latitude is not such a problem. A, you've got Polaris, and B, you can take a rough alignment. You take one of these digital alignment meters that gives you the angle of the surface, and it'll tell you it costs about $20 off Amazon, and you can roughly align it, and you only have one parameter to work at night. You don't have the right ascension, which is the most difficult part. You only have the declination to adjust, which really works fine. So if you have time to do it during the day, get a Soul, it's called a Soul Master, S-O-L, Soul Finder. No, I'm getting confused. Sorry, Soul Finder. It's called Soul Finder. The Soul Master, I get confused with the Pole Master. It's called Soul Finder. And with the Soul Finder, you can even attach it to here. You can just glue it on because it'll align exactly, and you can do beautiful alignment during the day. You don't have to worry about it at night anymore. That's it, my friends. My goodness, I think I've talked too much. I hope I haven't over-talked and confused you. Let me know if you have any other questions. I've spent over 1.25 hours just talking about equipment, which is so exciting because there's so much to know. I hope it was useful. By the way, I wanted to say I will be organizing tours. There's a Moab astrophotography tour. If you ever want to know where it is, I can put in the link. I'm running an astrophotography workshop in Moab next year. Be happy to join me, and the thrills of the sky. I will put in a link later for that workshop. It's somewhere, I think, in March 2017. And I am also looking at, if you like the, wait, let me just put this beautiful image here again. If you like doing something really crazy like this, which is absolutely novel, then come with me to Australia, because I will be looking at trip possibilities. Send me an email at I'll just put it in zassaphoto@gmail.com. We will be visiting Siding Springs, and You'll be seeing iTelescope and many other things, and I'll be showing you some beautiful Gmail. I couldn't even spell it. I apologize. I just misspelled that. I apologize. 1 second. At gmail.com. Apologies for that. That's the correct email address. zassaphoto@gmail.com. Send me an email. It was very useful. I'm glad it was. And I will, say if you're interested, there's no commitment at all. Say you're interested to come with me to Australia, and I will be looking at the costs and all that. And when the time gets closer, I'll inform you, and then you can decide whether that is something you like to do or not. So it's only just registering some interest at the moment. Just pop me an email also with any questions you may have. You will be able to see iTelescope then. You'll be seeing our wonderful telescopes. I'll be teaching a lot about image processing there. So I think it's going to be a very, very unique program, apart from a cultural visit to Sydney and so on. Okay, well, thank you all, my friends. That's about it today, and I wish you a wonderful Saturday. Hope you enjoyed this, and hope to see many of you in future. So I'll just see if I can stop the live stream now. Thank you.